All right, so these are the very first visuals that we are getting of the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who has now, we are given to understand, touchdown in Rome, Italy. Remember, the Indian Prime Minister is in Italy for the G20 summit, the grouping of the top 20 nations, the top 20 economies of the world, where Prime Minister Narendra Modi will, of course, be holding several bilaterals as well. So it is going to be a very busy schedule for the Indian Prime Minister, a power-packed schedule, where the Prime Minister is in Rome one day ahead of the G20 summit. But it's going to be a very busy day for him, where he'll be holding bilaterals with the EU Council's President and also with the President of the European Commission. He'll also next be heading to pay tributes to the bust of Mahatma Gandhi in Rome. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be paying tribute to Mahatma Gandhi in Rome. And after that, he'll be meeting with the Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi. And he'll, of course, end his appointments today by having a meeting with the Indian community, the Indian diaspora that is settled in Italy. So it's a very busy day. It's about 3 days that the Indian Prime Minister will be spending in Rome before concluding his trip for the G20 summit. And it is tomorrow that the G20 summit, of course, begins in earnest. This is, of course, a very crucial summit that is taking place that will focus on climate change. It will focus on how to combat COVID-19 infections, on how to try and frame policies that would result in a more equitable distribution of vaccines for the rest of the world, and also will focus on how to build back better. Because remember, the COVID-19 pandemic has hammered the world economy. The Prime Minister is in Rome as a part of the G20 summit. This is a grouping of the top 20 nations. This includes nations such as the United States, such as China, Russia, United Kingdom, France, amongst other top 20 economies of the world. India is, of course, a part of the G20 grouping, and the Indian Prime Minister has now touched down in Italy. These are the very first visuals of Prime Minister Modi, who is going to have a pretty power-packed schedule of diplomacy over the course of the next 3 days in Rome, where he'll also be meeting with the Pope. We are given to understand that his meeting with the Pope will happen tomorrow. That'll be the first meeting that the Prime Minister has scheduled, and then he'll also be attending G20 opening remarks that he would make roughly at about 1:30 p.m. tomorrow. He'll also be holding several bilaterals through the day, including with the French President, with the Indonesian President, with the Singaporean Prime Minister, besides meeting other leaders. And this is, of course, a crucial summit, and it takes place just before the COP26 summit that is slated to be held in Glasgow, that will focus completely on climate change. But the G20 summit in Rome is also going to be focusing on climate change. It is going to be focusing on building back better after the devastation that's been caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. This, of course, is the 16th G20 summit that is taking place in Rome. The Indian Prime Minister is attending this summit in person. This will, of course, be the 8th G20 summit that the Indian Prime Minister will be attending. He'll also be representing the aspirations of the developing world, the concerns of the developing world, and also will be highlighting the inequitability of policy in combating climate change. The Prime Minister is expected to discuss a whole host of different issues, from combating challenges of climate change to pitching for a global approach in dealing with the situation in Afghanistan as well. So this, of course, is a crucial foreign visit by the Indian Prime Minister. The G20 summit, of course, begins from tomorrow. The Indian Prime Minister is already in Rome a day in advance of the G20 summit. But it's going to be a pretty power-packed, busy day for the Indian Prime Minister, who will, of course, be meeting several leaders of the European Commission. The very first meeting that he's expected to have is a bilateral meeting with the EU Council's President. He'll also be meeting with the President of the European Commission. And once he's done with those engagements, the Indian Prime Minister, like he often does every time that he visits abroad, he goes and pays tribute to the bust of Mahatma Gandhi. And this time round, there is a bust of Mahatma Gandhi that has been installed at Piazza Gandhi in Rome. And after paying tributes to the bust of Mahatma Gandhi, he'll be heading over for a meeting with the Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi. And once his meeting with the Italian Prime Minister is done, he'll also be meeting with members of the Indian diaspora who are settled in Italy. And with that, he'll conclude his engagements for the day. So it is an important day of diplomacy for the Indian Prime Minister, and the G20 summit, remember, in earnest begins from tomorrow, and those will of course be two power-packed days of diplomacy where the Prime Minister will highlight the problem of climate change and also the problem with which the developed world is trying to deal with climate change. He'll be highlighting the inequitability of policies in dealing with climate change, the problem with the target of net zero emissions that the Western world seems to be pursuing. He'll also be highlighting about the problems of the inaccessibility of vaccines for many poorer nations around the world, as to have the richer nations have managed to, in many ways, corner almost about 76% of all vaccines that have been manufactured so far. Remember, India as a nation has been, as a deliberate policy, trying to export its vaccines even to those nations who cannot afford those very expensive vaccines. So the indigenous vaccines that India has manufactured, it has exported it to several nations around the world, including to neighbors, Bangladesh, Nepal, to Sri Lanka, and even to countries on the other side of the world, as far away as Brazil, amongst some other nations in Latin America. And to give us more updates in terms of what is expected in terms of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit, we're joined in by my colleague Siddhant Sibal, who's presently in Rome. We'll be tracking all the developments very closely for us. Now, good morning to you, Siddhant. It is very early morning in Rome, but we just saw the Indian Prime Minister has landed in Rome for 3 days of power-packed diplomacy. Tell us more about it.
Well, yes, Mohammed, it is 6 a.m. here in Rome, and the Indian Prime Minister has reached the country. It is a power-packed visit. We know that he's almost going to have bilaterals in double-digit. He's going to have almost 20 bilaterals. Today, of course, his focus will be meeting with the European leadership, with the EU President, and also he is going to meet with the Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi. We know that this is the first in-person meeting between the two leaders. There are certain community events as well, but with all COVID protocols being followed, and other than that, this visit will see him taking part in the G20 meeting. This is the 8th time that the Indian Prime Minister is participating in the G20 summit since 2014, and he can give proposals on various issues. He has been giving so in the past. In fact, in 2014, that was his first G20 summit he took part in Australia's Brisbane. He gave proposals on the issue of fighting black money, and that is something that was taken very seriously by the G20 grouping. But this time, as the leaders meet, there will be the shadow of the COVID crisis. Afghanistan, this is the largest in-person gathering of leaders amid the COVID crisis. Last year, we know the summit happened virtually under the Saudi leadership. But also remember, this time India becomes part of the Troika along with Indonesia and Italy. The G20 Troika is a governance structure under which we know that how countries collaborate with each other over hosting of the G20 summit. India hosts the G20 summit in 2023, and for that we know a mega convention center is being prepared at Delhi's Pragati Maidan.
Absolutely, indeed. Now, the theme of this year's G20 summit happens to be people, planet and prosperity. Now, Siddhant, a lot of criticism is also, is also given in terms of the policies which some of these Western nations have framed in combating climate change. Climate change, of course, will figure very prominently as a part of the talks in G20 summit. Many people say that the policies that the Western world advocates for combating global warming are in fact tailor-made for these Western developed nations and do not address the challenges that the developing world, of which India is part of, have. Now, is this something that is likely to come up for discussion?
Well, when it comes to climate change issue, we know that there are issues regarding climate financing. The developing countries are keen when it comes to more announcements by the developed world on climate financing. But nonetheless, even as the world is divided, India is taking a major lead, especially when it comes to renewables. India has committed to increasing its share of renewable energy in the overall power sector. Also, India has taken a major initiative on solar power. The India-led International Solar Alliance, the proposal in fact was given by the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the year 2015 at the Paris Climate Summit, and thereafter it has really been something being talked about in global capitals, and more countries in fact are participating in the International Solar Alliance. In fact, Israel is the latest entrant to the International Solar Alliance, and we can expect the Indian Prime Minister to talk about things which India is doing on the issue of climate change, whether it's here at the G-20 summit, whether it's at the Glasgow COP26 summit. We know that the G-20 summit comes just before the Glasgow meeting. So essentially this summit, the G-20 summit, will help form the consensus over the climate issue. But we know that even as the world is jittering or stands divided on the issue of climate change is something that has become a reality when it comes to day-to-day life. We have seen how southern parts of Italy have been impacted by climate change. There have been storms there, and whether it's New Delhi or here in Rome, nobody is in a sense safe from the impact of climate change.
Absolutely, indeed, Siddhant. This, of course, is a topic that we will be talking about a lot over the course of the next 48 hours. Thank you very much indeed for joining us all the way from Rome. And we'll, of course, come back to you as more things unfold as a part of the G20 summit. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.